Okay. Hi, Melissa. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again.
Well, thank you for coming back. It's nice to see you. We looked up the date, and you were here almost 2 years ago. It was March of 2021. So time has flown right by. As I remember, you are an emergency physician, and you're currently at the hospital, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, just to do the interview though, I'm not working till tomorrow.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming to work to do the interview. I appreciate that. The last time you were on, I don't remember the book that you were talking about. What book were you promoting at that point?
Well, I think it would have been Scorpion Scheme. So set in Egypt, where my protagonist, Dr. Hope C, the resident doctor who solves murders while saving lives. But that time she was in Cairo. It was just very unusual that I'd gone to Egypt.
This is a whole big series. I see one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, what, eight books in the Hope C series? Nine?
So
Nine
there,
books.
that was I did a ninth book, White Lightning. It could have been actually White Lightning that we were talking about, which was about prohibition and was set in three different centuries because I'd like to challenge myself. And then this is Hope, but in a new series. So in this series, she's still a doctor, she's still fighting crime, but now she also is taking on the paranormal. So there are ghosts in this book, which is called The Shapes of Wrath.
Is she your alter ego?
She is, yes.
So you always dreamed of being is she a superhero, or describe what she's like? It says she's a doctor, right?
She is a doctor. I didn't want to stray too far from the truth. Of course, I mean, knock on wood, I haven't had to solve a lot of murders in my in my medical career. I don't do pathology. I'm not a coroner. I'm looking after people who are still alive and coming to the emergency room. But I don't know, there was just something about working in Montreal and seeing all the people lined up on stretchers waiting to be admitted, and the frustration that was building that just made me really think about murder. So in that case, I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a doctor who was fighting crime, which is also something that you can solve easily. Like, you can't solve wait times, you can't hit a virus, but you can still you can hit and take on a murderer if need be. So I thought it'd be a lot of fun to write about somebody who could do that, and that's where I invented Hope C. The other difference for me is that I've been with the same guy since high school. I'm pretty boring that way, but for some reason I put Hope in a love triangle. So she has two different, very handsome men who vie for her attention. Because you gotta have fun sometimes. You can't just be stuck at the hospital.
Well, it makes for a more exciting story. I think people would appreciate that rather than, oh, I've been married to the same guy for 25 years or something.
Yeah, I mean, that should be thrilling, and yet most people don't find it thrilling. So
So she is the good guy in your book, right? She is the hero.
she is, although I do play with the idea of her not being so nice. Like in Death Flight, which is the sixth book in the first series, she's on an airplane. So you're trapped with the killer on the airplane. And I wanted to play with the idea that Hope could have killed the person.
Okay, why is she traveling all over the world? Because I see Stockholm, I see Death Flight. You said Egypt. What is she doing traveling all around?
Okay, no, she is a family medicine resident, so she is stuck in the hospital most of the time. Stockholm syndrome was when she was taken hostage in the hospital. So she was just stuck in a room for most of that one. And that one is based on a true story about how a woman was taken hostage while she was in labor, unfortunately. And I was just like, wow, that's a terrible story, but that would totally happen to Hope. So I just need to move that to Montreal and have that happen. So she's only been like, and for the airplane, she just went to LA and ended up coming back. So she didn't end up doing much of anything. So LA, Egypt, she went to Windsor, which is right across the river from Detroit, for White Lightning. That's about it. Otherwise, she's stuck in the hospital,
Oh,
which
all
is
right.
realistic.
Okay. Well,
And the Shapes of Wrath, she's in the hospital.
okay, we'll get to that one in a second. As an emergency room physician, have you actually seen gunshot victims come in? Have you treated people like that?
So I have to say, so I'm in Canada, right? And it's not as violent as the United States, thank goodness. I will knock wood, not at the moment anyway. So, we are legally obliged to report any gunshot wounds that we see in Ontario. Um, to be honest, I've seen very few, like more accidental or self-inflicted. And in the country, sometimes hunters come in and just they're hunting accidents, or well, we think they're accidents anyway. Um, it's not so much people attacking each other. And so that was one of the things that in real life, when I was in Montreal, the people who did the 5-year emergency medicine program, they would quite often go to Miami or some other big center in the United States because there was not enough trauma in Montreal. I stayed in Montreal, and we saw more motor vehicle collisions and that sort of thing. So there's still trauma, still things going wrong, and quite horrifically wrong, but not people attacking each other so much.
So when did you start this series? Must have been a few years ago.
Yes, I would have started writing in 2003.
Oh, so 10 years, yeah. All right, so about one book a year?
I am doing about one book a year, actually, yeah.
Okay. Was there any one particular thing that sort of sparked you to start writing? I mean, did something happen? Was it a dream or anything that happened in your work that said, you know what, I'm going to start a book series, and then it just sort of blossomed?
It was just a few things, so I don't want to get into details, but there are one or two real cases that have made their way into the series, maybe not as the main event, but as side things that happened. Certainly the flavor is the same. So it's just a way of taking control. You know what I mean? Because as a resident doctor, you have very little control. Every month you go on a different rotation, sometimes at a different hospital, could be on the other side of the city. And you don't have any say about that. Other people say, where you show up, when you do call, how long is your call, when do you get to go home. You can barely go to the bathroom, sort of thing. So, of course, I want to be able to write my own stories about it instead. But I have to say, I didn't start writing until after I graduated, because when I was doing medicine 24/7, I didn't want to write about it. And other people were like, you should write about it. And I'm like, no way. I wrote fantasy and science fiction more. But after I graduated, I was like, okay, I don't mind so much. I can play with it. But at the time, I was just like, let me get out of here.
I've interviewed a couple of lawyers who have done that, who are retired and have taken cases that they had, twisted them around and changed the names. And I would expect that there's a lot of fodder for writing in your job, yeah?
Well, you meet a lot of people in crisis,
Yeah.
Good or bad, so a baby being born, usually that's a happy occasion, for example, but also, devastation too. So there are lots of stories, and that's one of the things that attracted me to it in the first place, because I always wanted to be a writer. It's just that I wanted to be able to support myself. I didn't want to starve. I didn't think that was a good option. So I'm like, let me support myself. And how can I do that? I've always been good at science. I'd love to help people. Okay, medicine it is. As long as I can get in, which fortunately I did. It's getting harder and harder, so can't take that for granted.
So the new book, The Shapes of Wrath, which is a cute title, play on The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. You said it's a new series with the same character. Okay, so how is it different? How do you distinguish it as a new series?
Well, as I mentioned, it has a paranormal aspect, which I did start to bring in White Lightning, the last book of the first series, but I didn't go full on. And this series is going to be about the 7 deadly sins. So the first sin is wrath or anger, and there'll be 7 books in the series, and I'll go through each sin, and there will be a paranormal aspect to every book. So that's how it's different.
Paranormal ghosts, or what kind of paranormals? Vampires?
Actually, I've never been into vampires, but I'm leaving it open because I don't want to spoil it. Like, anything could happen, really. I've been trying to do more research into it, but I haven't committed yet to anything except ghosts. So for now, it's just ghosts.
Who is this other doctor? Dr. Vrack?
Yeah, he's the bad guy. he's the surgeon who runs his operating room with an iron fist. And of course, he's her preceptor for the rotation. So he's the one she has to deal with. And if he fails her, then she fails the rotation. And she's trying to get into the emergency medicine fellowship, which is very competitive. So she doesn't want to fail. But she also doesn't want to do everything that Brack is telling her to do, which is a pretty common thing. And he's a racist, sexist, homophobic piece of you know what. So it's an interesting conflict.
I know this is a little off the wall, but did you watch medical shows when you were growing up?
Very little. Like my classmates, sometimes we would have watch parties and stuff. But in truth, I just have never really liked medical shows that much. If they get anything wrong, I get very upset. Or like, I did watch Grey's Anatomy for a bit, and then I'd be like, they're describing the CT, but they're not showing it to me, and I want to see the blood. Or stuff like that. I would like rewind, so I would check it. I'm like, is that right? And I say to my husband, I'm like, I don't know that their way of fixing this is actually correct and stuff. And later, actually, I found that for Grey's Anatomy, they have mentioned that they wouldn't necessarily have the script all written out yet. So they would just yell, medical, medical, medical at each other until the script came in. And I was like, that seems accurate. And so he didn't enjoy watching it with me. And, one of my best friends was like, don't watch it for the medicine, watch it for the soaps. And I was like, yeah, but I had trouble doing that. So I couldn't get really into them. Although everybody says Scrubs is the most accurate. I never really got into Scrubs either. But anyway, it's not so much my thing, but, God bless the people who do and are into it and hopefully read books too.
Well, that's actually, you presumpted me a little bit, because that's what I was going to lead to, is if any particular show, if you thought, they didn't do that right, or, and there have been other shows where it could be lawyers, it could be police, where when they're in the profession for real and they say, oh no, that's nothing like it, that's Hollywood. It's like when people get shot, when we're talking about gunshots, it's completely different than what the movies portray. Fantasy, but I didn't know if there was one particular show that you watched that was complete fantasy to the medical profession or not.
But they all have fantasy. I think that's how you keep it going year after year. So in Grey's Anatomy, there was a bomb, at least once, where she had to put her hand in the chest to keep it from blowing up. I think like a bomb from World War I. They cut the LVAD wire, the woman whose fiance was going to, he was competing with somebody else for a heart, and she wanted him to get the heart, so she cut the wire. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but it's from one of the earlier seasons. Just things I didn't think would happen in general, but obviously make for exciting TV. So it works. I'm at the 10th season or something, so that works. And even on when I would watch ER and stuff, I would be like, even if something happens, they would cut out all the boring part in between. So they'd just be doing the shocks for VFib, but not the CPR in between. Or they'd want to do something heartwarming, so the female physician would take the time to explain sex and contraception to a teenager in the emergency room, which you might do, but it would be really hard to do it, and you certainly wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. So, I don't. And there were things that I just would shake my head at. I'd be like, they cut out all the boring bits or whatever. So I personally haven't seen a medical show that I thought was accurate. So it's more like, who's the best of the bunch? I did poll my colleagues, and I'm like, what drives you crazy? And every specialty had something. I actually have a whole presentation, Medical Mistakes 101, where I go through it. And one of the ones for surgery drove them nuts how the Hollywood solution to every gunshot wound was to pull out the bullet. It's not but it's really the damage that was done that you're interested in. But they're just like, oh, got out the bullet, now everything's okay.
And it's all over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Saved.
Well, Melissa, we are out of time. We need to wind this up. Thank you so much for coming on. The book is called The Shapes of Wrath, Debuts tomorrow, comes out tomorrow?
Exactly.
Okay. Last question. Could you give out your website, please?
Yes, the short form is www.myi.ninja. Ninja.
MYI.ninja.
So,
Okay. All right, very good. And there's links there to your social media and where people can buy the book and all that. Yeah.
yeah, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming back on the show. It was nice seeing you again. Best of luck with this book. You said there's going to be at least 7 of these coming out, right?
There are 7 deadly sins.
7 Deadly Sins. Okay. Well, best of luck with the book launch tomorrow.
Thank you, and thank you so much.